This boy created the most powerful weapon on the continent, all of that at just 14 years old. In this world, anyone who opposed the Empire was brutally hunted. Bill was a blacksmith. He was just a child when his cousin introduced him to the hero. That guy seemed like a good person, so Bill handed him his sword. But he had no idea what would happen after that. Before they left, he tried to give a ring to his cousin. She refused, saying she would only accept it when they defeated the Demon King. And so, the hero's party set off on their journey. Bill continued working as usual. A few days later, the soldiers appeared. The workers were protesting for better conditions. In the middle of the crowd, Bill found his uncle, but it was already too late. The captain of the knights announced that everyone should be hunted down. And so, one by one, they were all being impaled. Bill was just a child, watching all of this with his own eyes. His uncle appeared, telling him to run. The knights were still chasing through the alleys. One by one, the men fell, but Bill was smart. He used his forging skill. He had an incredible eye for structures and architecture, so he struck his hammer at a critical point. When the knights passed by, the building collapsed on top of them. After escaping, Bill was paranoid. He couldn't understand how everything had turned out like this. Little did he know things were about to get even worse. He would receive his uncle in a coffin, and his cousin, unable to say a single word, and so began the revenge of Bill, the blacksmith. But before that, after the escape, since they lived in a remote location, they were safe. Full of questions, our protagonist demanded to know what was going on during the protest and why things had escalated so violently. His uncle didn't have all the details either, but he agreed the reaction was abnormal. Slowly but surely, the Empire was placing less and less value on commoners. Desperate, Bill asked his uncle not to protest again, but the old man disagreed. He knew he had to keep fighting, but our protagonist couldn't understand this logic. It was too heavy a burden for them to bear. This left our protagonist even more hopeless. He had already lost his parents when he was young, and he'd lost touch with Sepia too. Indeed, the commoners were suffering more and more. That's why they worked so hard to keep the forge. But life was hard for everyone, and he didn't want to lose what family he had left. Our boy's uncle apologized, promising he'd do what he could to keep him from worrying. He told his other companions that he would leave the protest movement. The next morning, the same protesters were still asleep. Our boy was among them, but he was already awake. The first thing he saw was his uncle, still sleeping peacefully. It was a relief to know he had given up on the protests. Feeling a bit more at ease, Bill started to believe life might return to normal, until the door was suddenly broken down. Armed men stormed in, ready to deal with everyone inside. They were all being accused of treason. Now in cuffs, Bill tried to understand how this had happened. Something wasn't right. If they knew their location, they could have attacked during the night. The place was isolated. There was no way they found them by chance. It was at that moment that Bill heard a desperate scream. The other forge worker was an informant, but he never imagined his master would be arrested too. Our protagonist now understood. They had been betrayed. This filled him with a cold rage. Bill asked why his co-worker had sold them out like that. The boy revealed that the soldiers had promised not to arrest his master. He had even called his master completely useless, because the forge doesn't pay its own bills, and all that old man does is drink all day. The boy reported the protesters to collect the reward. This way, the forge wouldn't have to be sold. Now he was apologizing for what had happened. A few days later, our protagonist was brought before the ruler of the land. It had been a long time since he last saw the hero. The regent told the boy not to be afraid, calling him an old companion. Oliver told our protagonist to feel at home. He'd heard that our boy had joined the protests in the city. Bill said that wasn't true, and that he was a great admirer of the hero's work. Oliver smiled. Hero was an old title. No one had called him that in a long time. He said he accepted our protagonist's story as a citizen had testified on his behalf. This relieved our boy, who assumed the traitor had done it. Knowing they owed some taxes, Oliver paid all their debts with his own money. "It's the least I can do for the man who helped save humanity," he said, which made our boy feel embarrassed. Some nobles began to whisper, wondering who this man standing before the regent was. In this land, there are three great masters: the Cyclops of the Demon Lands, Vulcanus, the Forge Master of the Avaline Kingdom, and Midas, the Golden Hands of the Empire. The greatest of them all is Golden Hands, the one who forged the hero's sword, and that person is our protagonist. But the noble who asked didn't seem to believe it, since many craftsmen claim that title. The truth is, our protagonist is very modest. Only those in the right circles know his true identity. Our protagonist now had a question to ask the regent, and the regent was ready to answer. Bill wanted to know what happened to Sepia, as he'd lost contact with her. Oliver said she was on a mission and would return soon. When she did, he would send her to our boy's forge. Bill was very grateful for this promise. Our protagonist has one last request to make. He'd like to know if his uncle can return home too. In response, the regent warned that it might be too late. This terrified our protagonist, making Oliver laugh uncontrollably, as it was just a joke. Bill realized that the nobility's sense of humor is truly bizarre. Oliver has bad news to share and wanted to soften the blow with jokes, but that was a mistake. Our boy's uncle is not innocent. Even so, he'll see what can be done about the situation. Relieved by these words, Bill thanked the hero once again, seeing in him a radiant light. Back in his homeland, our boy continued to work. In the forge, there was a bit of money and an apology letter from the trader. Bill kept working, full of enthusiasm, believing everything would turn out all right. So he decided to make a piece of equipment for Sepia, for when she visited him. But many days had already passed, until someone knocked on his forge's door. They were envoys from the Empire, looking for our boy. Bill went outside anxiously to see what was happening. He had been waiting for this day for a long time, when he would be reunited with his uncle and his dear friend. Certain they must miss this place terribly, but what he found outside was horrifying. Sepia no longer seemed like the person she once was. Without her legs, she was sitting on a coffin. It was on that day that our protagonist's world completely fell apart. Completely shocked, our boy asked Sepia what happened to her legs. The girl couldn't even answer. She fell to the ground. Bill couldn't process this reality. Everything felt like a nightmare. To make matters worse, his uncle was inside that coffin. After seeing the body with his own eyes, our boy became even more desolate. He screamed in a complete rage, asking why all of this was happening to him. What he wanted most now was for things to go back to normal, but the pain he felt was as if his own flesh were being torn apart. Oliver had said that Sepia had gone on a mission. This only made our protagonist even more furious, because the regent had also made him a promise about his uncle. Now our protagonist has someone to truly hate. That day, when he met the regent, he received a gift to show he was his guest. It was a gold card which guaranteed him access to those lands, but if not needed, it could be sold, as it was of great value. Bill felt extremely honored by it, and he hoped to one day repay that kindness. Now, our boy uses that same card to return to those lands. He said he came to do some work on the regent's sword, but our boy's hands hide another truth. He is thinking about how he could defeat the hero. The probability of that happening is practically zero. Most likely, our boy's body would be cut to pieces. He might not even realize he'd been cut, and our protagonist's talent is in making weapons, not using them, and his masterpiece is in the hands of that scoundrel. Bill thought about this for a long time, and the answer is surprisingly simple. Something only someone with his skill could do. Repairs. Something every weapon needs. Someone in his profession would certainly do it someday. While he works on the hero's sword, the hero himself remains vulnerable. That was how our protagonist would reclaim his masterpiece. Before him stands an unarmed man, and in our boy's hands, the most powerful sword ever made. Bill is thinking of ways to end this man's life, whether to use the sword or the hammer. Lost in these thoughts, he heard Oliver say that he never wanted to be a hero. Our boy doesn't understand why Oliver has started to vent now. The regent said there's a limit to what can be saved, and he eventually became more realistic about it. He truly saved the world by defeating the Demon King, but everything would have been different if the enemies had never been able to invade that land. As he continues to vent, Bill stealthily approaches with the sword. The conclusion of the regent's thoughts is simple. He just needs to have a nation so powerful that its enemies no longer want to attack it. If that had been the starting point, there would never have been any war. After defeating the Demon King, Oliver thought about this many times. He wanted to avoid another tragedy. The answer to that is even simpler. He needs to be in command of the country. He removed the corrupt nobility and the indulgent royalty, ushering the country into a golden age. His goal is to make the empire something unprecedented, which is why he brought our protagonist here. But our boy wants nothing to do with it. He tried to attack the hero, ready to end his life with a single blow. Raising just one finger, Oliver lamented that this was happening. A magic arrow pierced our boy's shoulder. It was enough to make him drop the sword. Thanks to the noise, the Empire's troops entered the hall. Oliver told his men it was nothing serious. Even so, our boy was detained and arrested. Completely furious, Bill asked how the regent knew he would be attacked. Oliver said he had defeated the Demon King. He would have felt that killing intent anyway. The real question is, why didn't he react sooner? This left our protagonist intrigued. Oliver said he hadn't done anything yet because the boy has potential, and he wants to have him as one of his allies. For a brief moment, our protagonist considered this proposal. He can hardly believe this is real, but to be convinced, he has one more question to ask. Faced with this counter-proposal, the regent became very interested. Bill wants to know why Sepia ended up that way. After a brief silence, Oliver said she was very capable, but she ended up losing her legs in the last battle, and even after that, she didn't fall into despair. Then their team managed to achieve victory, bringing peace to the entire world. But the peace was short-lived. Humans began to war among themselves. The heroes had to participate in the war effort once again. Only Sepia couldn't help, for obvious reasons, feeling the loneliness of being left behind. Completely desperate, she tried to find a solution in a place no man should ever lay eyes on, and once again, she managed to return to the battlefield. But our protagonist saw the side effects of using black magic. Bill then asked why the hero didn't want to help her. They were companions, and yet he allowed her to sink even deeper. He let her carry all that pain completely alone. He is the protector of this land. He has power and influence. He could have helped with all of this. Our protagonist still remembers days that are long gone. Oliver doesn't see this as a personal responsibility. He added that our protagonist is in no position to lecture him, because if he was so worried about Sepia, he should have gone to war too. But he chose to hide behind the sword he had forged. And yet, he comes to talk about responsibility to the regent of this land, something only a coward would do. Bill wasn't affected by these words, stating that Oliver is just a weak man who runs from responsibility. Completely furious, the regent did not like being offended this time. Executing a single movement with his hand, it was more than enough to tear off one of our boy's arms. After that, he called him useless. But recognizing his contribution to the end of the war, he promised to spare his life, letting our boy suffer for the rest of his days because of the responsibility he had invoked. Oliver abandoned our boy with a mortal wound. After a few days, someone came to our protagonist's house. With a downcast look, Bill answered the door. On the other side was Sarah, someone who was once part of the hero's team. In a short time, she found out about everything that had happened. She pointed out that thanks to Oliver's efforts, the country was developing well, a comment our protagonist hated. She apologized for that, but upon seeing the boy's condition, she realized he couldn't do anything anymore. Even small repairs were beyond his reach, which is a shame for Sarah, as she has another version of what happened to Sepia, and this captured our boy's attention. To tell this story, Sarah wants a new dagger. Our protagonist will only charge for the materials and the version of the story she has to tell. With the help of a prosthesis, our protagonist began to work once again. He is sure that Oliver is hiding some truth. According to Sarah, Sepia was more than capable of dodging that attack on her legs, as she was the second fastest on the team. As for the enemy, its true power was in brute force. The fact that she lost both her legs doesn't make much sense. Sepia didn't fail to dodge. In fact, she chose not to, in order to protect the hero. The reason she returned to the battlefield is also very specific. The hero himself was the one who made the request. Oliver wanted to win the war, but the situation wasn't in their favor. At first, Sepia refused his request, since she was missing both of her legs. However, the hero already had a solution for this problem, an ancient grimoire they found in the Demon King's lands which could make Sepia even more powerful. The girl was obviously hesitant, as she knew it was black magic, a power that should never be used by humans. Faced with her refusal, Oliver became enraged. He said that what mattered now was that they were comrades, and she was refusing his request. He pressured her for an answer, implying they were more than just companions. This ended up putting a great deal of pressure on her, and for a moment, Oliver regretted what he said. He started to walk away from her, asking her to forget what they had talked about. But before he could leave, Sepia asked him to wait a little longer. Since she had decided to help him, the degenerate hero's plans had worked out once again. Sarah watched this whole conversation, hidden in the shadows. What's left of Sepia now fiddles with the ring our protagonist had made. She dropped the artifact on the ground, and it rolled to our boy's feet. Seeing this, he asked to see his friend's hand, just to give her the ring again, because if it was on her finger, there would be no way to lose it. But as he tried to do so, the ring fell to the ground once more. Bill found this very strange, unable to understand why the ring wouldn't fit, since it was custom made for his friend. Trying to put it on one more time, the ring fell to the ground again. This seems to be unsettling our boy's mind. He began to feel even more desolate, sinking into his own sorrow. After losing his uncle and his childhood friend, our boy has no idea when everything started to go wrong. Maybe it was that apprentice who betrayed them, or when Sepia left for the war. It could have also started with the hero's sword, or even before that. The suffering began when our boy learned he just got in the way, and life showed him that he has no power over anything. In the midst of his sadness, a hand reached for his head. Sepia, despite all the after effects, is still smiling, and she treats the boy with great affection. Bill understood that even in her state, his friend was trying to console him. This only deepened his remorse, as Bill believes he never did anything for her. Taking his hammer in hand once more, our boy made a promise, and no matter what happens from now on, he will not stray from his determination. As for the work he's doing now, he asked Sarah for a 2-week deadline. She regrets not being able to stop Oliver, so she also feels responsible for what happened to Sepia. Because of this, if our protagonist asks for her help, Sarah will agree to help him. However, she will only do it once. What our boy made was an even better prosthesis, so he can execute his revenge perfectly. A group of mercenaries is advancing. Their leader asked Hans for a summary of that day's mission. They are heading to a village where explosions are occurring. They need to find out what's causing them. It could be illegal research with explosives or preparatory acts for a crime. The leader told everyone to stay alert, as they are just students. The objective is to investigate, not to fight. And so the students advance with determination until they reached a heavily destroyed part of the forest. Analyzing the area, they found no traces of gunpowder, a sign that the damage might have been caused by magic. According to the evidence, the destruction is recent. Teleportation magic wasn't used either, since this place is very close to the village. The instructor was very pleased with the students' assessment, but they still need more evidence, until they heard another explosion in the middle of the forest. Far from there, our protagonist is learning to use a sword. He has a long way to go to learn this. His first movements are very clumsy, until someone found him there, but saw that he was just a novice swordsman. It's that same investigation group who were expecting to find a mage. Assuming our boy is weak, they concluded that not all of them needed to intervene. Hans asked the instructor if arresting the criminal was necessary, and, showing great wisdom, the instructor said they couldn't make serious accusations without proof. But according to their wanted list, Bill is a fugitive. Our protagonist watches as these strangers approach. One of the accusations against our boy is the attempted assassination of the regent, so his students were authorized to begin the capture. But they already know that for a criminal facing such charges, survival isn't a requirement. The three students launched their attack. The two young men managed to strike our boy. Bill felt the impact of those blows. Hans was very confused after this first exchange because our protagonist is very weak. His colleagues found this strange too. Perhaps he's just a pawn for someone more influential. Wanting answers, Hans kicked our boy's sword back into his reach. If he's a swordsman, he should die like one. An act of kindness from the self-proclaimed next hero, Hans, the side character. As he picks up the sword, Bill said, "They've got it all wrong." But since he was attacked without being asked any questions, he realized this wouldn't be solved through dialogue. Hans is now ready to finish our boy off, and before doing so, he belittled the young man's technique, showing him how he should move, until finally, he delivered a precise cut. Bill couldn't even see the attack. His head was almost torn off. Hans keeps up the pressure, landing another devastating blow. Next, he managed to kick the protagonist in the stomach, who for God's sake is really weak. Our boy went flying through the air like a soccer ball. Hans is even more disappointed with this performance, certain that capturing this punk was a huge waste of time. The instructor, watching all of this, started to find it very strange. They were supposed to be investigating explosions happening in that area. According to the evidence they gathered, there were indeed signs of explosions, but all they found was a talentless swordsman with no magic and no gunpowder. Our boy tries to ask them to stop the attack, but Hans doesn't seem interested in that. Still asking him to stop, Bill opened his hand toward his attacker, because it was time to end this. The poor side character didn't even notice what flew past his face. Our boy's prosthetic hand was launched far away, and in the process, it ended up claiming the side character's ear. Now it was Bill's turn to be sarcastic. His opponent had dropped his sword, something only a beginner would do in the middle of a fight. Words that made the side character even more furious, vowing that he would cut off our boy's head in a single blow, and he is about to fulfill his promise. But someone stopped the attack from happening. The person responsible was the team's instructor. Hans was visibly upset by this interference. Having observed the fight, the instructor realized our boy's strategy was interesting. Since he has enough destructive power to end the fight in a single blow, he needed to lure Hans in close. His attack wasn't fatal for one reason. The boy closes his eyes at the last second, a sign that he has never taken a life before. As someone with a lot of experience, the instructor knows that's an act that never gets easier. He immediately reprimanded Hans, who, for being so reckless, could have been killed, telling his student to look at the boy. He doesn't even look like a proper sparring partner. Hans remains furious. He doesn't want to leave things like this, but the instructor thought of it as a training exercise. Seeing that, until now, our protagonist hadn't behaved suspiciously. All that aggression was to test for any hostility. Given this, the instructor asked his students to remove the talismans they were wearing. Our protagonist started paying attention to this. And looking at our protagonist and possible criminal, the instructor asked if he was familiar with the Hero Academy's curriculum. One of the subjects is to train students to defeat evil without hesitation. To do this, they hunt down live criminals, so they can get used to the screams of pain. Bill Bark is a very familiar name to them, because one of the names they had to silence was Phil Bark. This revelation left our protagonist completely enraged. This was exactly what the instructor was looking for. Our protagonist is slowly being consumed by rage. He must continue with his revenge, defeat Oliver, and destroy everything he has created. For now, He needs to overcome these hero candidates and wipe them from existence. Completely. About to be attacked, Bill asked his aggressors to wait a moment. He knows they need a real target for their combat practice. Since our boy is a blacksmith, he doesn't think he can help them with that. The instructor seems interested in what he has to say, so our boy asked for some time to arm himself. That way, he could do his best to take them all down. Thinking our boy is going to run away, the students want to finish him off immediately. Hans remembered he has a finger from one of his targets in his pocket, and he wants to do the same to our protagonist. The instructor liked this proposal, but wants to know how much time they should give him. Bill asked for just 1 hour, which was immediately granted, and if the boy is late, he'll throw that finger to the pigs. After waiting in the forest, the students believe our protagonist has fled. This disappoints them, as they've lost class credits. Even so, the instructor wants to wait a little longer. The girl who was complaining earlier started to stretch. It was then that something shot past her hands, striking her hand with great force and brutality, enough to throw her a great distance. It's our protagonist's hand, his prosthesis, which managed to crush the girl's fingers. She is now screaming desperately. This time, the prosthesis returned to a full suit of armor. Thinking about the fingers he has to collect, Bill realizes he needs to gather 35. Furious at being hurt, the girl wants to finish our protagonist off cruelly. Her friends are ready to do just that. Moving quickly, they slashed at the armor, only to realize the battle won't be easy. The protagonist's armor remains completely impenetrable. The instructor asked if his students know what to do in a situation like this. The boys will aim for the joints now. That's the initial strategy. Bill was completely surrounded by the attackers, and the armor's joints aren't covered in plating. Focusing on these spots, the hero candidates launched their attacks, only to realize they accomplished nothing. Furious at being hurt, the girl charges forward to attack as well, but her attack is completely useless. It did absolutely nothing. The instructor noticed that our boy is soft-hearted. Even with the advantage, he chose to aim for the hand instead of the head, a behavior only a fool would show on the battlefield, something his students naturally avoid. They definitely aren't holding back now. After a few more attacks, Bill ended up on the ground. His helmet was stomped on by the girl. She's ready to end the protagonist's life. Unable to get up, Bill is being kicked around like a soccer ball, but this just left the students exhausted. Thinking of ways to finish him, one of the lackeys suggested breaking all his joints. Struggling to his feet, Bill said, "A 3-on-1 fight is cowardly." Hans seized the opportunity to choke our boy. While the girl attacked his arm, they want to finish him in a painful way. The other lackey also focused on the protagonist's arm. Bill understood the situation was getting worse, so there was no point in holding back. He flipped off the smug girl. Right after that, small holes appeared in the armor on his arms, revealing several spikes that completely cover his armor, which locked into their flesh. Looking at the instructor, Bill asked when he plans to join the battle. Without a word, the instructor just pointed at our boy, and looking back, Bill understood he still had to defeat the lackeys. It was time to draw his sword as well. Our boy made his first attack, hitting only air. His opponents are too fast. No matter how hard Bill tries, he can't reach them with his blade. And if he can't even beat a single student, beating Oliver is completely out of the question. Trying to use his head, Bill told himself not to be reckless, because what he's doing is like forging steel. You don't get the final result with a single hammer strike. You have to work hard at it. That's why our protagonist kept trying. Until finally, the tip of his sword struck someone's flesh, and for landing his first hit, Bill celebrated. Hans said it was pure luck. The other lackeys want to end the battle quickly, but they don't know how. Our protagonist has an excellent suggestion, activating something on his gauntlet. Several hidden machines in the forest were revealed, firing a large net over the students. They didn't expect an attack like this and want to believe it's useless. However, Bill said that not even ogres can break it. Hans said that if they don't return, the academy will send more people. Time is on their side. Keeping calm, Bill asked if the lackey knew why the trap was sprung only now. Because just like them, our boy also needs practice, and now he calmly approaches his target. Hans was terrified to the point of apologizing for what he'd done, but our protagonist knows exactly what to do now, leaving his enemy even more frightened. Hans tries to say his last words, only to have his head completely explode. The blood splattered our protagonist's helmet. My God. It looks like the instructor was the one who did it, and he seemed very pleased to witness what our protagonist could do. The lackeys who saw it are terrified. It didn't take long for the girl to scream at the top of her lungs. The instructor's message is clear. Bill passed the exam. This left everyone very confused. As the girl questioned the instructor, her head exploded. When the other lackey finally understood what had happened, He was finished off in the same way. After doing this, the instructor wished for those young people to go to a place where the adults are better. Having witnessed all of that, Bill was completely paralyzed, but the instructor assured him that he didn't need to be, since he had already told him he passed. Completely confused, Bill doesn't know what just happened, as he couldn't see a thing, much less understand why that man killed his own students. There's no way he can defeat a monster like that in battle. Calmly, the instructor said there was a misunderstanding. Those kids really deserve to die, but that doesn't mean they deserve to suffer during the process. Still in the middle of his speech, the instructor had to dodge an attack from our protagonist, but he had already understood that pattern. Facing a frightened protagonist, the instructor asked him to listen patiently, because he came to this place just to find him, since he knows he hates the ruler of these lands. On that matter, you could say they agree. That's why the instructor would like to talk a bit more. However, our protagonist remains very tense. There is no other option. What happens next is our boy's fault. The single blow landed on his helmet. After a long time, Bill woke up startled, realizing he was in a normal room. Against all odds, he was still alive. But our boy doesn't know where he is, nor what happened to his armor. He hears a conversation outside and, worried, arms himself with a pen. Discreetly, he decides to leave that place. With light steps, he began to move away from the room, until he found the instructor in another room, in the company of other people. It seems they're talking about our boy, and the control he has over his own strength. One of the men asked for more to drink. He seems to be completely drunk. Meanwhile, another young man is sorting some magic stones. The one who received some of those stones was Sepia, and this ended up making our protagonist very agitated, until someone touched him on the shoulder, asking if he'd been awake for long. Bill turned on this person, using the pen to attack. This worried everyone there, as the person being attacked is the boss. The man reassured everyone, showing that he had blocked the pen with his bare hand. This enraged the red-haired young man, who was ready to finish off our protagonist. The leader of these people knows that Bill is very scared and confused, but he asked to be forgiven for bringing Sepia without permission. Perhaps they thought it would be better for her to be with the boy. This man's name is Tyler, leader of an organization fighting the Empire. He wants to know if our protagonist will help them in this effort. Someone with his skills could be very useful, but the answer is no. Bill has only one objective: to end Oliver's life. Tyler really liked those words, but that task won't be easy, so he suggested they work together until Oliver falls. After that, Bill would be completely free. He proposed a mutual collaboration. Everyone is awaiting our boy's answer, and he decided to accept the proposal, but he pulled Tyler's hand close, as he believes these people made his uncle suffer, telling them all to leave, or he would finish them right there. The instructor tries to say it was a misunderstanding, as those fingers belonged to someone else. He liked the boy's desire for revenge, but he made it clear that the kid couldn't do anything on his own. In fact, he was sure Bill couldn't even defeat his target. Our protagonist remembered he had already lost one of his arms. This was not a pleasant memory. Suffering from post-traumatic stress, Bill fell to the ground, screaming in despair. It seemed he realized he couldn't get his revenge. Besides losing those he loved, he had also lost an arm. His lack of strength was a true torment. Someone calmed our boy down, holding him by the shoulder. Bill noticed the hand that touched him was missing its fingertips. Edric was the owner of that hand, and he suggested our protagonist listen to what they had to say. Elsewhere, several weapons were thrown to the ground. Prisoners on death row were told to pick them up now, and thanks to the generosity of the Count of those lands, whoever won a fight against him would earn their freedom. But these people were arrested during a peaceful protest. They didn't know how to fight. The Count signaled to his servant that he was about to speak. Then, he ordered the hostages to be brought out as well. They were the family members of those who were imprisoned. The Count was ready to make his move. He said that his own companions couldn't even pick up a weapon before they became strong. They were all normal people, and the Count didn't care about that. If they weren't able to raise their weapons, he would give them a reason to fight. Furious, one of the men decided to charge forward with a sword, and as he closed in to attack, the Count used a hostage's body as a shield, causing the man to strike his own fiancée. Immediately after, the Count cut off his head, and he was still waiting for a reaction from the other prisoners. If they didn't do anything, he would provoke them until they did. Knowing what could happen to their families, they launched their attack. The Count patiently awaited their approach. Without much effort, he tore them all to pieces. But it didn't seem to be much of a challenge. The identity of this despicable nobleman is Zahir, who is also a member of the hero's party. Currently, he is in charge of commanding the regent's army and defending his territory. As long as he holds his position, there is no need for the regent to take action. Our boy asked if the Count usually travels alone, and if the revolutionary forces were capable of defeating his army. This question made the red-haired boy smile. He said our boy was stupid, that it made no sense to want to fight the conventional army. Apparently, he didn't even know where he was right now, and that made our boy think a little more. He noticed the place was damp, the temperature was low, and there was a ventilation system. The place must be a basement. A rather obvious answer, which made the red-haired guy keep mocking him, because that wasn't just a basement. In fact, They were inside a system of underground tunnels. It was a complete city. This truly impressed our boy. But Tyler confirmed the information. This secret city leads to every corner of the kingdom, and they would use it to capture Zahir, eliminating his subordinates one by one until the target was completely alone. Guerrilla tactics would be essential to demoralize the enemy. After this presentation, our boy was taken to a training ground. There he continued trying to learn how to use a sword, striking blows against the training dummy and repeating the motion over and over. But because of his very modest skill, the sword slipped from his hands. It ended up landing at the instructor's feet, who had a comment to make about it. Our boy had no talent. Bill said he would only make equipment if he could fight, but that was proving difficult. All this greed would get him killed on the battlefield. After hearing these words, Bill picked the sword up from the ground. As he walked away from the instructor, it was as if he had ignored his words. And indeed, he had, because he had a question to ask. He wanted to learn how mana concentration worked. For the instructor, a mage would have a better answer. But that's not what our protagonist wanted. He wanted to know what the instructor did with those students, concentrating some kind of power at the tip of his weapon. Now the instructor was surprised, as he didn't imagine our protagonist would notice that. That would only be possible if he had eyes that could see mana. Imagining this could be true, the instructor said this was an incredible find. Our protagonist could really see mana, so he had real talent. Teaching him to fight would be an amazing experience, but showing a creature that had been captured, a large monster, the instructor revealed he was a bit busy. Bill wanted to know where the man was going. The answer was rather obvious. He needed to return to the Heroes Academy. To maintain his position as a spy, he needed to show results. Finally, the story revealed the instructor's name, Varhan. At the fortress in the Count's territory, a large army began to move. They were searching for a suspicious person, and would do so with great dedication. The squads were already inside the forest. Some men seemed to have heard something, and they were ready with their spears to capture this person. Without asking questions, the soldier thrust his spear into the bush, but to his surprise, what he found on the other side was a small rabbit. Seeing this, he suggested to his colleagues that they roast it. At that exact moment, a mysterious person revealed themselves in the shadows. As this mysterious person fled, the soldiers began a pursuit. As they did, soldiers from the platoon gradually started disappearing. The chase led to a dead end. The remaining soldiers didn't notice the trapdoor beneath their feet. They were swallowed by a large trap filled with spikes. The one who did all this was the red-haired boy. With his trap, he managed to annihilate an entire squad. His name is Draco. Elsewhere in the forest, a soldier was desperate because he was watching his comrades being finished off. Desperate, the man thought about sending a magic signal to call for help, but he ended up being finished off too. Their bodies were discarded in a large trapdoor. Another platoon had been completely destroyed. A metal net was thrown over other soldiers. This trap was designed by our protagonist, and in fact, it was being praised. Our boy's supervisors were there to observe. Now that the soldiers were captured, it was suggested they surrender. But among those men was someone completely calm. It seemed that even while captured, he maintained all his confidence. One of the revolutionaries realized this was a stubborn enemy. It was time to make an example of him. Our protagonist sensed the danger and told the guy to get back. Distracted, he looked back and didn't see what the soldier did. Breaking free from the trap, he cut off the poor extra's head, which was thrown into the air like a basketball. This put the rest of the revolutionaries on high alert. They couldn't let their guard down against this enemy, who was not a conventional soldier. Able to see mana, Bill knew this man was as strong as the instructor. With the possibility of being even more powerful, he was the captain of the Count's elite squad. Our protagonist and his allies were afraid. They realized everything could go wrong now, because this really was the captain of the elite squad. With the current team, a direct fight would be catastrophic, but the girl had an interesting idea to execute. She told her men to split up and attack the enemy from the sides. The troops advanced into combat. The first extra was about to find out something very cool. A second extra was also interested in this. The intention was to completely distract the target. While he was distracted by the extras, the girl moved in for a deadly attack, finding an opening in the captain's defense. But he was an experienced combatant. For the captain, defending this sneak attack was easy, and he did it with so much force that he destroyed the girl's dagger. Even though she was thwarted, her plan was still in motion. Our protagonist stayed behind, in a firing position. As if he were Mega Man, he was ready to shoot. Before that whole operation, in a kind of laboratory, Bill had asked some questions about making explosives, and why they didn't infuse them with mana while doing so. Bhaskar, the one in charge, said the material was very delicate and sensitive, so it was a bit risky. Infusing mana wasn't impossible, but there were too many variables to consider. With the equipment they currently had, it would be impossible. Only someone with divine skills could do something like that. Being the protagonist of this story, this wasn't impossible for our boy. His devastating shot was about to destroy the captain's mustache. An extremely violent explosion had just occurred. The cloud of debris prevented our protagonist from knowing what happened. His companions were very impressed with this firepower. Through the smoke, the captain appeared once more, ready to attack the girl. The bystander panicked, throwing his body in front of the attack, only to be brutally struck by the enemy. Our protagonist was ready to fire again, this time an ice attack. The blue blast was already heading towards the enemy. The mustachioed captain was completely frozen, left utterly motionless. But it didn't last long. He managed to break free from his prison. Completely enraged, he decided to charge toward the protagonist. Bill already knew his current firepower wouldn't be enough. In that case, it was time to try something else. The bystanders were ordered to protect our boy. They tried to reach Captain Mustache, but they were too late. The captain was already poised to annihilate our boy. Just then, the girl used a strange magic. Roots shot out from the ground, trapping one of the enemy's feet. Captain Mustache felt he couldn't move forward. Before he could even realize it, he was swallowed by the earth. Our protagonist hadn't expected anything like that. The one responsible for this magic was the red-haired boy. He was the one who saved the day. His presence on the battlefield brought relief to everyone, but they couldn't relax just yet. Upon learning they were fighting Captain Mustache, Draco became genuinely worried, but only for a moment, as he was pleased to have captured someone so powerful. His joy was short-lived, as Captain Mustache managed to climb out of the hole, filled with rage. Draco couldn't believe the man had escaped his trap. Landing on the ground, Captain Mustache unleashed a devastating blow. The whole fight had left him furious. He promised himself that everyone would suffer greatly. Bill was ready to fire again, but Captain Mustache struck the ground once more, throwing everyone off balance. Draco scolded our boy, saying he was trying to shoot from too close. That's when the protagonist revealed that the strategy was working. The attacks he had carried out so far were effective. Draco was simply unable to understand his words. He told our boy to stop talking nonsense and not to interfere with the fight. The creature with the red-haired boy started digging around the protagonist, making our boy fall into a hole. Draco told all his allies to get away from him immediately. Captain Mustache couldn't believe it. This enemy wanted to face him alone. It was time to crush this petulant at once. Draco struck the ground with his shovel, saying he would summon the pit of hell. Around him, a huge hole appeared, large enough to swallow anything. Captain Mustache fell once again. Still in free fall, he declared he would climb out all over again. However, the earth that had been removed from the hole began to return to its place. What was once empty was now back to normal. Draco was exhausted, but relieved that his attack had worked. On top of that, none of his allies were caught in the friendly fire. The only one still there was our protagonist. Draco was annoyed by his presence, as he had told our boy to evacuate. The situation was still dangerous. That attack was made with magic and would soon disappear. Despite hearing this, Bill remained alert, watching the ground with his cannon ready. Draco's magic finally faded, revealing Captain Mustache, who was now climbing the massive hole, ready to deliver pain and suffering. Draco was already thinking of an escape route, while our protagonist prepared to fire. Bill ignored all warnings to flee. He watched as Captain Mustache approached, his low-budget sharing and taking in every detail. With intense focus, our boy analyzed the enemy's body. He fired an electricity attack straight at him. Captain Mustache had no time to react. The impact was direct and brutal, powerful enough to pierce the captain's armor. It was definitely a fatal blow. Feeling the piercing pain, Captain Mustache became enraged. Even so, he kept climbing up the wall, ready to unleash all his hatred. Bill watched, completely helpless. The captain promised to crush him completely, swinging his powerful club toward our boy's head. But something mysterious happened at that exact moment, causing Captain Mustache to freeze. Behind him, a hole had just appeared. The captain finally understood. His target had vanished. Draco had managed to create another hole, saving our boy at the last second. "We don't have the strength to beat this enemy," Draco told our boy, telling him to stop being so reckless. Bill, on the other hand, was already thinking of ways to make his attack even more powerful, and he already knew how. Outside, Captain Mustache screamed in desperation, furious that he couldn't find his targets. Amid their escape, Bill was certain that next time, he would finish Captain Mustache for good. This filled him with hope. Back at the hideout, they lamented the presence of Captain Mustache, who had caused unexpected losses. But thanks to everyone's efforts, the catastrophe wasn't worse. Bill wanted to know the next plan. Tyler said the boy was impatient, as he was just about to share what they would do next. "It will all start with the Shadow Intelligence Squad. For this, they wouldn't need many troops. They needed to strike fear into the enemy. "I'll start with the eastern region of the forest attacking mercilessly," he explained. "Then we'll vary the attack positions. We will intentionally leave only one survivor. The goal is to make that person's fear spread among the troops." Everything went as planned, and rumors began to spread among the Count's troops. They now preferred to take the night watch instead of exploring the forest. One of the soldiers was very sleepy, and as he yawned, the entire structure of the wall trembled. The underground attack unit had begun its work, but to the people on the surface, it just seemed like an earthquake. The underground city connected the entire kingdom. It was time to disturb their sleep. Inside the forest, the Shadow Squad continued to take lives. The attacks were progressing very well. On the wall, the Count's soldiers were terrified. At one point, it seemed something happened. A soldier had fallen asleep, only to be awakened by a powerful blow to the face. Captain Mustache was responsible for it. It was time to start the patrol. He wanted to hunt the enemies of the Empire. The captain's impatience had been predicted. He would join the search parties. Draco suggested they capture the captain, but Tyler had other plans. They would just let him wander through the forest. Draco was confused by this as they needed to capture Captain Mustache. But for Tyler, it wasn't the perfect moment yet. They had to eliminate other risks first. When Captain Mustache went outside, they would halt all activities. This started to make Captain Mustache furious, and while he wasted time outside, the Shadow Squad worked inside the walls, eliminating the capital's officers. Once again, fear began to spread. The constant vigilance deprived the soldiers of sleep, and the chain of command was slowly being compromised. This would directly interfere with Captain Mustache's control over his troops. Surrounded by fear, he could no longer command effectively either. Faced with successive failures, he had to speak with his superior. Zahir summoned his captain for a talk. He had heard that things weren't going well lately. It seemed Captain Mustache's troops were becoming insubordinate, and about that, the captain had nothing to say. Even so, he tried to say the situation wasn't so serious, but the Count no longer believed such words. He threw a crumpled paper ball at his captain, but he did it with so much force that it sounded like a gunshot. Zahir didn't appreciate his subordinate's insolence. This made Captain Mustache apologize. There was only one reason the Count had hired an idiot like Captain Mustache. He needed to prove his true worth. Now, the captain was completely isolated, and this was his last day as the Count's right-hand man. Tyler had to decide who would face this powerful enemy. It had to be done cautiously, because even if he was a fool, he was a formidable foe. Without a second thought, our protagonist volunteered for the task, guaranteeing he could defeat Captain Mustache. Draco was very surprised by this confidence, and asked our boy how he planned to do it, reminding him that his previous attacks had done nothing. Tyler was interested, and wanted to know if Bill had prepared something new. Our boy admitted his attack lacked power last time, but now it was different. His weapon had been improved. Draco was still a bit skeptical. If the attack failed, their entire plan would be ruined, and that was true. Tyler said they couldn't lose this chance, but our protagonist remained adamant, claiming that if he fails, they could cut off his other arm. A very foolish promise, one that makes no sense to anyone. Draco said he doesn't need that piece of crap. Tyler, on the other hand, started smiling widely, but he's still interested in Bill's plan and asked for more details. After all, he needs to be convinced. Deep in the forest, Captain Mustache continues to hunt his enemies, and finally, he found something interesting. Just looking at them with his crooked eyes, he was filled with rage. Before him stands our protagonist, accompanied by Draco. Our boy started preparing his cannon, which is now ready to set the world on fire. Quite happy with this encounter, Captain Mustache asked the boys if they knew why he brought a wooden club. The answer is very simple. It's the perfect tool for crushing worms. Draco watches the enemy approach and uses another of his techniques, making the earth grab Captain Mustache's leg. But things aren't going as planned. The goal was to have Captain Mustache sucked into the ground. However, using only brute force, Captain Mustache is preventing that from happening. Our protagonist, on the other hand, is ready to fire another shot. Using his maximum power, he launches a beam of lightning. The blow could have been lethal, but Captain Mustache dodged it with great ease. He wasn't even impressed by the attack. But when he looked back, he started to get very scared. Even Draco couldn't comprehend all that firepower. Apparently, these magical tools are truly dangerous. Draco was completely ignored by the enemy. With his ego wounded, he decided to attack, ready to strike Captain Mustache's body with his shovel. Our protagonist, with his strange eyes, told his companion to avoid contact. And everyone in this story is an idiot. The guys hear a piece of advice and decide to look back anyway. Captain Mustache slammed the ground violently, causing a small earthquake. Draco was completely terrified by this, and decided to retreat immediately. There was mana in that attack. Draco wondered how our protagonist saw it, but their priority is to keep fighting. Captain Mustache is still alive, and he's about to close in on the boys. But by creating holes at the last moment, Draco managed to prevent the worst from happening, leaving the enemy even more furious. The boys appeared behind Captain Mustache, and our protagonist is already prepared to fire once more. A devastating fireball is heading towards the captain, and this time, it made contact. Captain Mustache is being cooked inside his armor. Bill realized then that normal attacks don't work against this enemy. Taking advantage of the distraction, Draco built a wall of earth, which was easily destroyed by Captain Mustache. With him approaching, they had to flee through the holes once more, and every time this happens, Captain Mustache gets furious. It was time to be a little more destructive. Using his strength, Captain Mustache kicked the ground once more. His intention is to destroy the network of tunnels the boys made. Captain Mustache keeps kicking the ground, hoping to reveal his enemies. It's working. The boys are starting to get cornered. Our boy returned to the surface, but he ended up emerging too close to Captain Mustache. At the last instant, Draco managed to push our boy away to prevent something worse from happening to him. Back to his exotic training, the instructor spoke a bit more about the eyes he has. Unfortunately, our boy hasn't seen many battles. The knowledge he has about forging he learned from books, something only geniuses could do. Bill wanted to know if mana control is a common thing, and found out it's not that simple, demanding a lot of practice time. And right now, Bill needs to act fast during this battle. Draco knows he just needs to block the first attack. He's using all his energy to prevent something worse from happening, putting 80% of his mana into his hands and the rest into his feet. And thanks to that, he managed to block Captain Mustache's strike, but only for a second, because he soon felt something terrible in his body. Captain Mustache managed to kick him in the ribs, sending the poor guy flying. Draco was completely out of commission after that, and he couldn't even understand what had just happened. Only the protagonist realized it was a feint. The mana wasn't in the main strike. The real impact was concentrated in the force of the kick. Now Captain Mustache can turn his attention back to our protagonist. To achieve victory, Bill needs to use an even more powerful attack. There's not much to be done now. He's completely alone. With only one arm, Bill won't be able to block the attack either. The only option is to keep fighting. Captain Mustache never imagined our boy would be able to use a sword, but that's not important. He wants to crush him with his blows. Our boy is just waiting for the impact. Right now, he's only used 20% of his cannon's power. It's enough strength to block Captain Mustache's attack, who definitely wasn't expecting something like this. The boy's sword is still intact. While the captain is still thinking, Bill fires an ice attack at him. This is only happening because Captain Mustache was distracted by that block, but the ice isn't strong enough to hold him. Our protagonist needs to use this opportunity to use his sword, but Captain Mustache isn't an ordinary victim. He's still very dangerous, and he's already prepared to smash our boy's head. But to his surprise, his wooden club is being cut. Bill's strike managed to pierce even the captain's armor, who is now feeling a crushing pain. Draco is still awake and realized what our boy did. He can really see mana. That's a completely absurd ability in combat. For our protagonist, it's all the same. If he can see the energy, he can cut his enemy and end this fight. Now that he's injured, Captain Mustache can't believe what's happening. He's literally losing to a boy with a missing arm. That's why he said he's going to take this fight seriously. He's ready to end this once and for all. And to show he was serious, he adjusted his naturally crooked eye, promising he wouldn't falter again. Our protagonist saw the mana being concentrated in the club. Knowing the attack was dangerous, he simply dodged it. To get even further away from Captain Mustache, he fired a shot at the ground, using the impact as leverage. This put him at a safe distance, giving the protagonist an opportunity to plan his next attack. He decided to approach Captain Mustache once more. Bill decided to fire at the sword's blade, causing a rather curious impact. It wasn't very effective. Captain Mustache is ready to surprise him, but all he managed to do was get hit in the face by the explosion, leaving his mustache completely scorched. This man's fury has just reached levels never seen before. His blows are relentless, but since he can see mana, Bill can see the real danger in his actions. Captain Mustache's hand is the real attack. Something brutal just happened, and blood is flying through the air. Captain Mustache's hand has just been split into two symmetrical halves, and his face contorts in pain. The captain's arm looks so bizarre, it's more like a tentacle. He still can't understand how something so serious happened. To make matters worse, Captain Mustache can't tell if our protagonist is using mana. Bill now has the total advantage in this combat. It's time to end it all. He fires several shots at the enemy, who now flees like an animal. With this volume of fire, Bill realized he's losing his lethality, but the enemy doesn't know that, so he keeps running in desperation. Our boy noticed the mana gathering at Captain Mustache's feet. He plans to get closer. The enemy vanished in the blink of an eye, immediately surprising our boy. But thanks to his bizarre eyes, he can see everything with great clarity, making his blocks completely effective. And once again, our boy's sword passed through Captain Mustache's flesh, who still doesn't understand why he's being defeated. Perhaps the secret lies in that blade, which must hold some kind of mystery. Thinking about survival, Captain Mustache knows he needs to understand that attack pattern. But all he can do is dodge the blows, until he was finally hit once more by the explosion. And with that, he understood that the attacks had grown weaker. The only real danger left was the sword. Our protagonist started to worry, because the captain had really understood the situation of the fight. So, he began to protect his entire body with mana. This makes it very difficult for our boy to predict attacks. It's impossible to know what will happen now. Captain Mustache continues his determined approach. Another chaotic attack just occurred. Captain Mustache used his injured arm. He landed a blow on our protagonist, forcing him to drop his sword. This enemy is truly insane, using his deformed arm to keep up the assault. That last impact damaged our boy's cannon. Once again, Captain Mustache regained dominance in the fight. All he needs to do is prevent our protagonist from reaching that sword, so he decided to get closer to it. Looking at the blade, he understood our boy's fighting style even better. He must be that blacksmith who tried to attack the regent. The Count had already mentioned what happened. In those lands, there was a master blacksmith, the one responsible for forging the hero's weapon. He constantly refused to make weapons for the nobles in exchange for a life of luxury, until one day he went mad. He was captured by the regent and became a criminal. Despite having his freedom, he acts ungratefully. That's why Captain Mustache will exterminate this villain now. As a representative of justice, it's time to pass judgment. Our boy's sentence is a cruel death. Because of this long speech, Captain Mustache didn't notice the sword had disappeared. Bill said Zahir was always a liar, and apparently, that hadn't changed. Captain Mustache couldn't understand how he had lost the sword. Ignoring this variable, he charged forward to attack again. What he truly wants is to prove his worth to the Count, already picturing his triumphant return. Everything will be decided in this next attack. But what he didn't expect was the sheer amount of energy in that cannon. The light of 1,000 stars filled the air. A huge explosion erupted in the middle of the forest. The blast threw both fighters far apart. Now, they are separated by a huge crater. Captain Mustache doesn't seem to be doing very well. Unlike him, our protagonist can still walk. His cannon was completely destroyed, but he can still hold the sword. It was a risky move, but it paid off. Bill overloaded his damaged cannon, something that could only be done once. He watches the captain, who is defeated, completely out of commission. The time has come to end this man's life. Before that happens, a flashback into this man's life. A big but cross-eyed man. Because of that, he never fit in anywhere. At first, people were afraid of him, but then they realized he was shy. Captain Mustache soon became a victim of bullying, because he always acted kindly. This just made everything worse. It wasn't long before he became a joke to everyone. His co-workers wanted to know if he wasn't tired of getting beaten up, but everything he did just gave them another reason to bother him. And even getting beaten constantly, his body could withstand it all, because he didn't feel pain like ordinary people. After a long day of work and harassment, it was time to return to his family, his beloved animal companions, and Mustache took very good care of them. As long as he had them, he would never feel alone. News about the war began to spread, and taxes were getting higher and higher. This was right after they defeated the Demon King. Struggling to make money, these people noticed something. Captain Mustache was carrying a basket full of bread. It wasn't long before he was beaten up again. Because he didn't fight back, he lost everything he had bought. At least he managed to save a little bit of bread to share with his rabbits. That was more than enough to keep him happy. On his way home, he saw his neighbor's children. They seemed to be playing some game, and one of them said he needed followers, who are also his family. This made Mustache think, and he realized his rabbits weren't his followers. They were just his family. Still, that conversation was very confusing for him. At night, he witnessed something terrifying. Some men were eating animal meat. They were the rabbits Captain Mustache had been caring for. Food was extremely scarce, and the rabbits were not spared. This awakened an unprecedented violence in Captain Mustache. For taking all those lives, he was condemned to death. But for someone like him, who had always suffered, the sentence was a relief. It was at that moment that someone decided to intervene. Zahir heard about the man who defeated 6 soldiers with his bare hands and easily crushed 23 people. He is strong enough to become his subordinate. On that day, the giant's life changed completely. Followers are family, and with a family, he would never be alone. Back in the present, Bill is trying to gather the courage to do what's necessary, but he took too long, and Captain Mustache regained his strength. Our protagonist wasn't expecting this fool to get up, and his body doesn't have enough strength to move. It's time for Captain Mustache to show a little more violence. But before he could finish off our protagonist, something approached him at high speed, causing another explosion. A spear had been driven into the ground between the two combatants. Captain Mustache looks in the direction the spear came from. A blonde woman was responsible for this, and she's impressed with what our protagonist has done. That's why humans have to be good at something. Captain Mustache thought it was very stupid of her to get rid of her weapon. This only made his job of finishing them all off easier. But what he doesn't know is that this extremely well-drawn woman is also very strong. She's as fast as lightning, and has already dealt him some pain. Captain Mustache fell to the ground, not understanding what had happened. His powerful friend went there to save our protagonist, but the poor guy doesn't even have the strength to stand and faints immediately. After several hours, Bill woke up, seeing Sepia before his eyes. She was on top of our boy, waiting for him to wake up. Outside, the red-haired boy was also waiting for this, but it seems he interrupted a rather intimate moment. Our boy was unconscious for 4 days, a very worrying amount of time for them. Now that he was awake, it was time to get dressed and join the others. The commander wishes to meet with our protagonist. It's that blonde woman, Sylvia, who was already worried about our boy. Bill can still remember what happened. She was the one who saved him, and because he fought bravely, she has a reward for our boy. He can choose his unit. But regarding this matter, Bill is completely ignorant. Knowing this, Sylvia will explain to him how things work. The first division is Varhans, the lightning strike unit, and they are on the front lines. Then there's the shadow intelligence, which works stealthily. There's also the medical team responsible for taking care of the wounded. Bhaskar is in charge of engineering and making explosives. Finally, there's the underground unit, led by Draco. It's time for our protagonist to choose one of them, and our boy needs to think very carefully about this. Faced with all the proposals, Bill refused them all. None of these units appealed to him, and there's only one thing he's good at, so Sylvia wants to know what he wants to do. Bill expressed interest in creating a new unit, an independent force where he can work to his full potential. In the past, his apprentice once asked a question, how he is able to find the best materials. Back then, Bill wasn't able to give a proper answer, because it's not something he learned to do. He's simply able to see it, and people work the same way. When our boy focuses, he is able to identify peculiar traits in people. A young man with a rare talent for magic, but who couldn't use any magic at all. But he didn't give up. His enthusiasm was truly interesting, but this boy never understood why his magic didn't work. Bill said his mana flow is cut off at his fingertips. It's congenital. No matter how much he trains, that won't change. Obviously, the young man didn't like this diagnosis one bit. However, our protagonist has the solution to the problem. He told the young man to use magic through his mouth, that it might be easier. That sounds even more absurd. And not taking this advice seriously, the young man ignored our boy. But after a while, he realized he had nothing left to lose, so he might as well try. Using his voice, a great flow of energy was released, and he couldn't hold back the flames coming out of his throat. Something completely unbelievable. Right after that, his body collapsed, as he had used too much energy. Another one in a similar situation is Amelia, an elven warrior who's been stuck in basic training for several years. She hasn't been able to feel mana so far, and our protagonist noticed something different about her. Magical talent is rare, but there's something even rarer than that, the ability to use sacred power, and that girl is able to see this energy. Bill started to think about what a good team needs. Strength lies in diversity, and the same logic applies to people. Draco, in his division, can improve everyone's mobility. Roar, the voice guy, can perform ranged attacks, while Alia can get the wounded back into the fight, and our protagonist can handle mid-range attacks, adapting to any situation. These are all the members he needs for his unit. Eventually, they defeated a creature together. Their teamwork is improving. Bill finished the monster with a precise strike, proving that the squad's teamwork is impressive. They had finally completed their task. But to have his own unit, Sylvia asked our boy for new armor for the attack unit, since they're on the front lines, the most dangerous place. To craft it, Bill chose the leather from the creatures they were hunting. The monster looks like a bear, and its hide hardens on impact. The most useful part of the hide is on the creature's back. The rest of the hide hardens randomly and can immobilize the wearer. But our protagonist knows something special. He can see the paths of mana. Through this, he can manipulate them precisely and delicately, making the leather more pliable. Now he just needs to assemble the pieces he's made, creating layers capable of absorbing impact. Finally, the armor is ready, made of reactive leather. All he has to do now is make 299 more units. His work would be easier if he still had his apprentice, but after everything that happened, that's unlikely. As for his immediate goal, these armors won't be enough to defeat Zahir. That's why he needs to make a full set, with boots and gauntlets, to form a weapon during an attack that increases the combatant's speed and absorbs impacts. Excellent gear for quick attacks. This way, the soldiers can advance with speed without the risk of falling. Oliver was very impressed with what our protagonist had made. Geez, now everything's confusing. Zahir wants to know why our protagonist hasn't been arrested yet. Forcing him to make weapons would be much more useful, but Oliver is sure that would interfere with the quality of the products. It's better to let our protagonist do what he wants. After working hard, Bill returned home, only to find the place completely empty. When the time is right, Oliver just needs to collect everything that has been made. Our boy's apprentice is still working as an informant. Their plan was executed perfectly. Tom is truly a despicable character. He still doesn't understand that he's only hurting everyone. Taking advantage of all this, Oliver keeps lying to him, saying he would never take our protagonist's life. After being robbed, Bill found several soldiers outside his house. His property was confiscated, and now he will be arrested. Bill started to look around, but there was nothing he could do. All escape routes were blocked. Desperate, Bill grabbed some embers from the fire, throwing the incandescent rocks at the soldiers. The fire spread easily among the men, giving our protagonist a chance to escape. However, he was already being followed by those who remained. Bill is desperate. He needs to find a weapon to protect himself in this situation. Going to his tools, he started looking for a useful prosthesis, finding a very special blade among them all, and it happened at the right moment, as an armed soldier was ready to skewer our boy. The spear comes furiously, but our protagonist is not easy prey. Another flashback. The instructor is cutting pieces of watermelon and offered one to our boy. He's impressed with the battle against the mustached captain. Bill is disappointed with the outcome. He couldn't finish off that enemy, and this made the instructor curious, wanting to know if our boy regrets it. In a way, the fact that he failed makes him very regretful. But for someone like an instructor, taking lives is never easy. Unfortunately, they were born in a period of history where everyone must fight. Eventually, combatants get used to it. But that doesn't make this kind of action easy. They just stopped being shocked. Someone like him, full of experience, also has a hard time with it. In the beginning, his hands wouldn't stop shaking. However, he had to fight if he wanted to keep living. His actions were completely unavoidable. He had to take many lives to keep breathing, until he reached the point where his hands no longer trembled, maybe because he finally found his courage. But looking at what he had left behind, it's hard to call so much cruelty courage. Bathed in blood, he felt much more like a monster than a warrior. This is the curse that our protagonist now carries as well, because he has just ended a soldier's life. His sword is stained with that soldier's blood. This made the situation even more delicate, as the other soldiers are willing to be even more violent, but there's nothing they can do against that absurd prosthesis. Bill keeps cutting through metal, piercing armor, a process that is repeating itself endlessly. A small platoon blocks his escape, but this is a platoon of dead men. They are all becoming just pieces on the ground. Completely desperate, one of the soldiers started calling for reinforcements. In the middle of the city is Roar, who heard the noise and then lamented. It won't be necessary to do anything at all. His job is to help our protagonist. Finally, he saw several army men on the move, and that started to make him very suspicious. Something very big must be happening in that region. And looking at the horizon, he can identify where the fire is burning. From the direction, he knows exactly where it is. The troops continue to advance, only to become training dummies for our boy. Those who approach him are being completely eradicated. Bill has become a life-annihilating machine. His entire body is functioning with a single purpose, until he finally pressed a secret button on his gauntlet, making his strikes even more lethal and violent. Back to the flashback. The instructor said that our protagonist is a normal person. Whether he can do it or not, he will only find out when the situation forces him to act, and maybe he too will become a monster. Like the instructor, Roar, knowing something serious was happening, went straight to the protagonist's forge. He needs to know if his captain is okay. When they first met, he immediately realized the boy was an incredible person. It's no wonder he holds the title Golden Hands. He's very different from the other classes, who are used to destruction in battle. That's not the case with the captain, who can see the true value in people and skills. As soon as he arrived at the forge, he realized what was happening. Our boy had transformed into a war machine. At this rate, his body or mind will break. Roar doesn't know if he should help using his magic, and since he still doesn't have control over his technique, he'd be exhausted immediately. He can only count on Sylvia's strength now. Roar saw some broken branches and a large boulder. Then he confirmed that no one was around. This way, he managed to enter the underground city through one of the secret entrances. He makes his way quickly to call for reinforcements. In the hallway, there's a button made exactly for this. Roar pressed it as soon as he could. The signal had been sent, but he found it strange and began to doubt if the button was really working. Knowing it all depended on it, he mashed the button until his hand was hurt, because our protagonist was responsible for changing his life. It's time to repay him, and this is the least he can do. Roar wants to save our protagonist at any cost. Fortunately, His determination paid off. The button is working. Now he just has to wait for reinforcements to arrive. At headquarters, the communications department received the message. It's about the special squad assembled by our protagonist. According to the message, the forge is in danger, and this made everyone very worried. This is a real emergency. They need to sound the alarms immediately. The message needs to be taken to Tyler, who was immediately informed about what was happening. Draco already imagined something like this would happen. Bill should have used the forge in the secret city, but for Bhaskar, our boy had to return, as he's more familiar with his own tools. A master like him depends directly on the materials he's using. The two argue, while Tyler explains what must be done. Reaching a conclusion, he asked for everyone's attention. The priority now is to find a way to rescue our boy. We can't lose him. The plan of action will depend on the protagonist's abilities. So he asked Draco, who saw our boy in the field, how long he can fight against normal soldiers. Recalling the battle they had, Draco believes the protagonist can hold out for an hour. The problem is, it will take them almost 2 days on foot to get to where he is. The situation is really complicated, and if he gets captured in the capital, they won't be able to rescue him. The solution is simple. They don't have to leave this place. They just need to send someone who's already in the capital. Draco doesn't know who could be sent on this mission, until he finally remembered there is someone who can help. And it's with this person that Tyler plans to save our boy. All Bill has to do now is bravely withstand the attack. Our boy is already completely exhausted. His enemies notice this and want to use this chance to end the fight. Bill doesn't have the strength to dodge the next attack. He just watches as the spear gets dangerously close to his eyes. In the last instant, someone appeared to save the day, completely crushing the soldier who wanted to finish our boy. The course of the battle has just changed, once again. A mysterious, masked warrior had appeared. In what seems to be a flashback, a man started defeating creatures. Watching his work as the instructor. For someone as experienced on the battlefield as him, watching all this is very boring, until a messenger bird flew near him. It left a small piece of paper on the ground. The instructor approached the message. He was then called by his students, who had finished defeating the creatures. The instructor said that day's lesson was over, but he had already read the message, and that's how the mysterious masked warrior appeared in the fight, praising our protagonist's resilience for surviving this long. Thanks to that, the masked warrior can continue the fight. He is fully prepared to finish off all the soldiers. They are nothing more than fodder for his blades. Their bodies are pierced and destroyed, and their joints twisted in a cruel way. Bill can't even notice anything, as he's about to lose consciousness. Even so, he wants to join the battle. Showing he can be very foolish at times, he attacked his savior. A moment of great confusion on the battlefield. But thanks to the boy's lack of strength, the blade didn't even hurt the masked warrior. Since he's still a danger, it's time to put him to sleep, because the masked warrior has real work to do. After a few minutes, the swaying of the galloping horse woke our boy up. The masked warrior noticed the protagonist had woken up. Bill still doesn't know who saved him. Revealing his own face, Varhan managed to calm our boy down. Still very confused, Bill wants to know what happened and where they are now. Right now, they're on the outskirts of the capital. The instructor had to rescue Bill urgently. It wasn't an easy task, but the instructor is a capable warrior. Seeing our boy covered in blood, he asked how he's feeling after turning into a monster. Reflecting on these words, Bill fell silent. He still remembers all the bodies he sliced with his blade, feeling an enormous disgust for all of it. For Varhan, everything happened just as he had predicted. After galloping for a long time, he freed the horse. They need to find an entrance to the underground city, and for that, they must head into the forest. It was then that the instructor asked our protagonist if he wants to learn to control the monster. Bill never imagined something like that could be possible, but this is the instructor's own theory of mana control, and about that, our protagonist became very curious. First, he needs to close his eyes. There's something people usually get wrong. Mana is not a type of power. It can't be limited that way. It's more like emotions that fill the body. Bill needs to analyze those he feels repulsion for, his will to fight, and his desire to end lives, moving this small spark to where he wants to channel his mana. In a short time, our protagonist started to feel a small knot, but this isn't an easy thing to do, and the knot soon disappeared inside his chest, which was expected for a first attempt. Knowing this, the instructor knows a way to speed up this progress. Hiding in the forest, they realized they were being followed. Soldiers are trying to track them, and they'll keep doing it until sunset. This only happened because this time they're knights, and among them is an execution knight, which made our boy very agitated. An execution knight is as strong as 5 common knights, a perfect training partner. Varhan will take care of the extras and asked our protagonist to attack the execution knight, but to do so, He can only attack using the power of mana. He shouldn't depend on his prosthesis. Bill felt very challenged by this task, as he doesn't know if he's capable. However, he has a great desire for revenge. His only option is to make it work. Now Bill is determined to end this. His target is the knight without a helmet. There's no time to hesitate, only to fight. Remembering all the negative feelings in his heart, they are like ores, to be melted and transformed into power. Everything must be purified by fire, a fire that is already consuming our boy from the inside out. His heart had become a hammer, and his emotions, the furnace. The knot inside his chest is getting stronger and stronger. This is the mana he needs to learn to control. On the other side of the battle, the instructor manages to subdue all his enemies, but he wants to know if Bill can feel the power of mana yet. Our protagonist remains completely silent, until a mysterious energy began to flow through his prosthesis. He could finally feel the mana flowing through his weapon. A few hours earlier, the uproar had happened. The news of Bill's escape. His former intern was in the palace and didn't understand what this meant. He immediately asked the regent if it was a mistake, but what was in Oliver's eyes was the purest hatred, and it was quickly transformed into a serene expression, telling Tom that he needed to speak privately with the Count, so the boy had to leave. Oliver already knows exactly what's happening, but the Count still didn't understand his words. Since their days as heroes, Zahir had never disobeyed Oliver under any circumstances. He had asked them to preserve the life of our protagonist's uncle, but he ended up finding out what really happened. Oliver's proximity left Zahir trembling with pure dread. He immediately begged for forgiveness from His Highness. Oliver said they didn't need all that formality. Zahir admitted he had acted recklessly, driven by the heat of the moment. These words didn't make Oliver any more understanding. So he asked if his subordinate still planned to disobey his future orders. Completely terrified, Zahir said he would never repeat something like that, but Oliver wants to have a frank and sincere conversation, like they used to in the past. That's why it was Zahir's turn to ask a question about it. He'd like to know the reason why Bill was spared, now that he's become useless. Oliver said the Count is still stuck in the past. He still doesn't see things as they really are. To some, Bill might be a completely useless blacksmith, but he's not someone who forges conventional weapons, and that sword is the greatest proof of it. Zahir started to become quite impressed with what he was seeing, and by manifesting a bit of the blade's power, Oliver made the whole hall light up, stating that Bill is capable of forging his own future, and surely Zahir must have felt that just now too. Bill is able to read the flow of mana in the materials he uses, aligning them perfectly, as if the equipment had a life of its own. It's definitely a breathtaking skill. Knowing this, Zahir said that our protagonist is too alive to stay alive. He needs to be finished, and to protect the regent, Zahir asked to do it, but Oliver refused, telling the Count not to drag Bill into his own inferiority complex. Our protagonist must be brought to him in perfect condition, because that boy belongs to him. Zahir realized that Oliver is a very strange guy. Who wants to possess a boy who no longer has an arm? Still amused by this monologue, Oliver started talking about the hardest steel that exists. It's not the one in Oliver's pants when he talks about our protagonist. The hardest metal can only be forged in a fire hotter than lava. Even after losing an arm, Bill continues to have an extraordinary talent. Oliver wonders what he will be able to forge, motivated by revenge. And from the first time he saw our boy, he saw in him a talent that could overshadow his own, the only one capable of standing as his equal. Being so dangerous, he must make him his property. The weapon made to kill the regent will one day belong to him. After hearing this very strange outburst, Zahil excused himself. He believes I saw a lot of nonsense, and he believes the protagonist is just a common blacksmith, with no power, no strength, and no honor. He's not on the same level as the heroes who completely changed the course of the Empire. One of the Count's men informed him they were already heading to the location where Bill had escaped. If he leaves now, he can get there in just 2 hours. But the Count was furious about this. He doesn't think our protagonist has the ability to escape. He and that masked man will suffer greatly in the forest. It's only a matter of time until they're captured. He says this while trying to crush his subordinate's face, but he decided to throw him on the ground to avoid making such a mess. It's time to return to his lands and find out who this masked man is. But what truly offended the Count was hearing from Oliver that he has an inferiority complex. As soon as he arrives in his territory, he will make all the traitors suffer. Back to our protagonist. He's in the middle of a very fierce battle. The Executioner Knight is trying to make him surrender. Our protagonist feels the mana fluctuating in his blade. Because of this, He was repelled in the last attack. He still lacks the control to keep fighting. He still can't focus the mana exactly where he wants it, unlike his adversary, who can make this energy flow freely. The knight said that our boy is very good at dodging attacks. Perhaps his specialty is running away. Since he can see the flow of mana, Bill believes he's able to dodge this attack, but he was caught off guard by a brutal punch. Bill didn't understand a thing. The attack came faster and from an angle he wasn't expecting, but he doesn't know how it happened. Now he needs to worry about dangerous attacks again. Our boy managed to dodge it, and he also noticed something very interesting. Thanks to this, he started to move further away from the enemy, but this knight is seriously dangerous. Bill believed that mana was only for increasing strength, defense, and attack. However, he can do many other things with this energy. The parts of the body that have this energy move differently, and now he's beginning to understand this principle. Mana becomes part of his body. Because of this, he can make this energy flow through his prosthesis as if it were a real arm, understanding that he is one with his weapon, the secret behind maintaining constant focus. After the last exchange of blows, the knight noticed that our protagonist had gotten a little stronger. The masked knight was pleased by this. It's well worth it to keep teaching this prodigy to be a true warrior. Even so, with the mana he has now, defeating a veteran knight is no easy task, and if he's not careful, it might even be impossible. A devastating blow was just blocked by our boy, but his mana control is still very poor, causing his entire body to become overloaded. The executioner knight said that this battle is meaningless. As he keeps pressuring Bill, our protagonist feels like he's about to collapse. He needs to put some mana into his feet as well, just to maintain his stance. But this caused him to lose strength in his sword, which is already starting to crack. This might have been a fatal mistake. Before he could be cut down, a knight was thrown into the middle of their battle. The masked warrior did it, apologizing for interrupting the fight. He didn't imagine his opponent would fly so far. Completely furious, the executioner asked what his men were doing, giving our protagonist time to regain his focus. Now that he knows how to stay on his feet, he can use his prosthesis' abilities, as he was authorized by the masked warrior. It's time to figure out a way to win this battle. Receiving this permission, Bill was greatly relieved, as the battle would be over in the blink of an eye. The executioner couldn't understand this overconfidence, ready to completely finish off this proud boy. But every time Bill forges a sword, he thinks about this exact thing. Even if it's sharp, it will always meet resistance. Since our boy lacks technique, he thought of another solution. A kind of impulse. When the mana from the magic stones is released, his sword gains speed. Bill shot past his enemy like a flash of lightning, leaving only a gash behind. The executioner can't even comprehend the extent of his own injuries, but he ended up being mercilessly cut down. Proving his inferiority complex, the Count took revenge on some rebels, and what truly irritates him is the letter he received, informing him of our protagonist's escape. Someone approached him, amidst all the bodies. It seems he had another rough day. The one approaching the Count is Sahil, and he had finally returned. It's Zahir's younger brother. The poor guy went to hug his brother, but what he actually received was a kick to the face, since the Count dislikes such excessive physical contact. Sahil had been away from his family for a long time, and this is how he's welcomed. He was on the battlefield. To his older brother, this is just another day. He was in the group that subjugated the Demon King. Indeed, Sahil agrees that his brother is an incredible person, the great weapons master, known throughout the world, an extremely well-rounded fighter. He is Sahil's greatest source of pride. Since their family, he immediately noticed the Count was in a terrible mood, even though he tries to deny it. But just by looking into his eyes, Sahil knows something is wrong. Not to mention the rumors spreading through the city about someone named Bill. The Count immediately stood up before his brother and asks if he came all this way just to annoy him. Sahil apologized, stating that wasn't his intention. In fact, he acknowledges his brother's strength, saying his gaze is perfectly terrifying, and that he should always be aware of the great person he is. Zahil ended up getting embarrassed by this whole speech, but what his younger brother really wants to do is help him. If there's something bothering him now, he can't just ignore it. Zahil told the young man not to worry about it, that it was just a small miscalculation. Changing the subject, they decided to leave that place to have a meal. In the palace hall, Sahil was presented with a great feast. The boy didn't think twice and started eating like a ravenous animal. Zahil asked him to slow down a bit, knowing he hadn't been deprived of food. However, the boy confirmed he was starving. The only meat on the battlefield was from monsters, but to Zahil, that's nothing special. He had to eat that kind of meat for 8 years. To his younger brother, that's one of the things that makes him even more incredible, as it's very difficult to survive under those circumstances. However, as the hero's younger brother, Sahil should value that title and not see himself as an ordinary person. But to the boy, it's just a title, as he was always told not to act recklessly. And hearing the rumors, he wants to know what our protagonist is like, if he has any real talent. Once again, the Count became furious, crushing his wine glass in his hand, stating that the protagonist is a nobody, just a blacksmith who can't fight. The maids approached the Count, worried about what he had just done. Sahil still doesn't understand why his brother gets so upset about this kind of thing. And about our protagonist, he must have some talent. Otherwise, he wouldn't be such a big problem. In fact, the weapons Zahil used in his military life were made by our boy. Zahil said he only kept them because he's been using them for a long time and is used to them. If our protagonist were captured, Sahil would like to have a weapon made by him as well, but that can't happen, as the regent wants our boy brought to him immediately. Disappointed by this, Sahil wished the delivery could be delayed by a few days. Knowing he's friends with the regent, he asked if something like that could be arranged. But the Count knows the regent very well, and he knows he doesn't mix personal matters with this sort of thing. And once again, according to the rumors, Sahil believes that isn't true. Bill was in the middle of a protest, and instead of being arrested, he was sent home with gifts. Perhaps the Count doesn't really know the regent anymore. This comment ended up making the Count completely furious. He told his younger brother to shut his mouth and go back to eating in silence. Sahil chose to obey this time, so as not to make the situation even worse. He continues to eat in complete silence, watching his brother intently, until he decided to ask another question. He still believes Zahil is one of the coolest heroes, much more so than the regent himself. Everyone else had some kind of privilege, while he had to earn his place on his own merit. After defeating the Demon King, he continued to perform great deeds, eventually becoming a Count. He is the hope of the common people. In the past, this was a title given to him, but it's just a false image built in the past. Curiously, the instructor is talking about this very subject, and he asked our protagonist what he still remembers about Zahir. He was just a reckless young man who liked to brag about his own accomplishments. Zahir now values only the nobility and persecutes the commoners who once adored him. In fact, the instructor discovered something disturbing about him. Zahir was the one responsible for our protagonist's uncle's suffering and death. Without realizing it, the instructor had just planted a seed of great evil in our protagonist's heart, and he asked if this information was actually true. But so far, he's just pieced together rumors he'd heard, and the probability is very high. What's truly surprising is the calm our boy maintained. Bill knows that getting angry about it won't change a thing, leaving his instructor quite proud. Anyone can feel anger, but not everyone is capable of controlling that feeling. Bill can't be swallowed by his own emotions. He must use them as fuel to move forward. Surprising our protagonist, the instructor executed a stealth attack, but it was just a simulation to show him that he must find openings in his enemy. That was the lesson he had to teach at that moment. That same day, the revolutionaries celebrated our boy's safe return, and they're doing it with plenty of alcohol and food. Some people's capacity for getting drunk is truly astounding, while others want to experience the pleasures of alcohol but are stopped because they're too young. Bill remains quite apathetic, which made Tyler ask why the star of the show is acting this way. Our boy is disappointed because all the equipment he made was stolen. There's no excuse for it. Draco strongly agrees on this point, and even had to be discreetly reprimanded. Indeed, what happened is very unfortunate. Tyler wanted to see the combat power of all that equipment, but they can't blame our protagonist for what happened. Bill should do the same, but the protagonist knows that if he had been working in a secure location, none of this would have happened. They all knew the risk, but they ignored it. It's everyone's mistake. Decisions have consequences. Varhan was the one who saved our boy, who was in danger because they hadn't been more insistent. In light of this, Tyler apologizes and also thanks them at the same time. Bill still can't understand why this is happening, but the instructor said it's not the time to argue. It's not worth figuring out who's to blame. It serves to show who is responsible for everything. This is what a real leader does. They take responsibility, even if it's not their fault. It's the power of the authority he holds in that place, and if our boy wants a leadership position, he needs to take on all that responsibility too. This opened up new horizons for him. This apology isn't just about feeling bad, it's a way of showing responsibility. Finally, our boy decided to raise his mug, accepting the leader's gratitude, recognizing him as his commander in that operation. Now, everyone can celebrate properly. After the celebrations, our protagonist went outside, where he found a certain someone, who wants to know why he wants to form his own division. Draco said that our boy still doesn't understand what leadership is. Even though he was forgiven by everyone, Draco hasn't forgotten what happened. A leader can't act the way our boy did. That stubbornness could have cost several people their lives. Bill apologized for what happened. The possibilities are endless. If more people had been in that place, it could have been a huge catastrophe, something our protagonist completely disregarded. But so far, he still hasn't understood what Draco really means. Who is getting more and more furious because our boy really hasn't understood a thing. so he's going to teach him what needs to be learned, asking what would have happened if he hadn't been alone at that moment. The first scenario our boy imagined was with Sepia. That would have made it impossible. He wouldn't have been able to escape, and they both would have met a cruel fate. Thinking about this, Bill regretted apologizing. Since it won't change things, he understood that his own actions could put others' lives at risk. Draco is now a little more pleased with this realization. This line of reasoning makes a lot of sense, because a true leader can't rely on apologies. They must be determined to take responsibility. That's what will make his squad follow our boy. On the outside, Draco looks like a young kid, but he didn't become captain of his own unit for nothing. He's very mature and experienced. Bill felt ashamed of what he had done that day. Before being left alone, he called out to Draco one more time, asking the young man a very specific question. Mysterious words that left him completely speechless. As a blacksmith, our boy has a specific line of reasoning. A sharp sword doesn't make someone a good swordsman, nor does the style of the blade. It seems our protagonist is close to an answer. The goal of his unit is to form an elite team to defeat important enemies. Alone, they are not capable of defeating Oliver, or even Zahir. They need to combine their fighting styles and fight as a real team, so they don't have to depend on any single person's strength. They must act as a chain. Creating this system will be his way of being responsible for everyone. Draco was surprised by this. It sounds crazy. Even so, it seems a bit fun. Our protagonist started sharing his ideas. The instructor watches the two of them, increasingly impressed with our protagonist, possessing a determination that overcomes criticism. He has what it takes to become a real leader. The next day, they went up to the surface outside the barracks. Bhaskar is showing our boy the new location for the forge. For this, he needs to balance 3 elements: wind, water, and earth. Some materials can become extremely toxic when refined. A constant airflow is needed to clear away all these impurities, which is what our boy is looking for. The next step is water, needed to cool the heated material. It needs to be at the ideal temperature so as not to compromise the cooling process. That water is good, but if it were a little colder, it would be even better. With his own eyes, Bill found an ideal source, so he decided to approach it to see if he was right. When she put her hand in the water, Bhaskar was surprised because it was colder there. That's another step that has just been solved. What he needs now is to choose the earth. It needs to be a solid spot, so the hammer's impact isn't dissipated. Our boy stomped the ground using a bit of mana. His whole body trembled as a side effect. He even asked Bhaskar if she had seen that too. The ground is so firm that the mana waves spread through it. This is the ideal place for a forge. And he's impressed that Bhaskar found such a perfect spot. But this woman is also impressed with the boy's skill, having done all this so quickly. In fact, she only knows this place is good because of the knowledge passed down through generations in her family. Truly, the talent our protagonist possesses is absurd. Bhaskar just thanked the boy for recognizing the quality of that land. Interested in this project, Bill wants to know when the forge will be finished. And according to their plans, it could all take up to 4 months of work. But since she's also motivated, she can complete the task in just 2 months, something that truly impressed our protagonist. With that, he's counting on her to do a good job. Back at the barracks, it was announced to everyone that a new operation will happen in 3 months. The target this time is Zahir himself, and right now, fighting him could be very risky. That's why they'll start by attacking his closest allies, his personal knights, and the bureaucratic body of his territory. As for the knights, they're all on the same level as Captain Mustache. The old drunkard isn't worried about it, since he heard the rookie defeated Captain Mustache. Bill made sure to point out that the enemy was careless in combat, and had greatly underestimated them, besides not having proper equipment. If he had a metal weapon, things would have been completely different. On that note, Sylvia herself agrees, stating that Captain Mustache could be as strong as an instructor. Upon hearing this, he started smiling broadly, saying that mustached guy is no match for his strength. Either way, they can't lose focus during that meeting. In 3 months, a diplomat will visit the city, accompanied by 2 knights. They're going to take out this target, starting by attacking the Count's forces. This will throw his territory into chaos, creating the perfect opportunity to attack him. Over the next 3 months, everyone must continue to train hard. During training, Roar said it was too intense. The elf agreed, as she still doesn't know how to handle her holy power. They wanted to finish their basic training first, but our boy assures them this is also part of it. To be synchronized, they need to have a minimum skill level. A differentiating factor for them is the use of equipment, and knowing what they're using will greatly accelerate each person's individual progress. That's why they need to personally mine what they'll use. The problem is, this place is dangerous. Bill told his comrades to be quiet, because they're not alone, someone else is here too. Hiding in the shadows is Zahil. Properly hidden, our boy's team continues to approach. On the other side of the cave is a giant spider. For them, This is a lucky find, since they have the elf warrior's holy power. Oil spiders have contaminated hides, which must be purified before being used as raw material. First, they'll weaken the creature with this magic. But our boys' team is quite fearful of this. Bill told them to prepare for battle immediately. It's time to gather some materials. Yahello knew the traders were trying to gather materials, so he went to a very specific place, hoping to find our protagonist in that cave. But what stands before his eyes is a completely random squad. He doubts these people can get stronger just by using good equipment. About to start the fight, the squad begins to gesture. Their captain gives the order to begin the attack. Yahello waits patiently for them to approach his blade, seeing his enemies as mere fools, who are unable to keep up with his speed. Now the extras are sure they're going to die. Looking at his own sword, Yahello says that just by holding it, someone can become stronger, so he decided to throw it towards his enemies, because it was something our protagonist had done. It's one of the most powerful swords in the Empire, and he told his enemies to try using it against him. Yahello decided he would use another weapon, grabbing a piece of rock from the cave. The squad is already very wary, but if that weapon was made by our protagonist, they might have a chance. The leader asked one of his men to call for reinforcements, while the rest stay to fight. Yahello admires his enemies' courage, who are already in formation to continue the battle. Everyone is just waiting for orders. Most likely they can only buy some time. Victory is practically impossible. Even so, there is still hope. And indeed, that sword is on another level. Mana flows through it very naturally. This is a chance to defeat this enemy of the revolution. Filled with courage, the squad advances to finish off Yahello, who, even defending himself with a piece of rock, is still a formidable enemy. But the rock didn't last long against that sword, revealing itself to be even more powerful equipment than expected. They need to use this opportunity at all costs. Yahello seems to be cornered by his enemies. An arrow was shot towards his head, but the attack was completely blocked by his piece of rock. Yahello needs to prove something to himself during this battle. He's impressed that the rebels have mastered the art of forging. The extra, hearing this comment, understood absolutely nothing, and the one wielding Yahello's sword just lost one of his arms. But the cut wasn't as perfect as Yahello would have liked. Once again, he throws the sword to his enemies. It's time to find out which fool will be the next to try and fight him. One of the extras charges forward furiously, ready to avenge what happened to the squad leader, but his effort is completely pathetic. He's thrown against the nearest wall after taking a heavy blow. The battle is practically decided. Yahello is using the arm he had cut off as a weapon. The remaining girl and the boy with the bow are completely frozen. They're already thinking of fleeing, but they'll have to do it alone, as the squad leader has just lost his life. Yahello once again told the girl to pick up the sword. Now she is completely furious, because in her personal life, she was in love with the squad leader,